Once carrier lorries were a common sight on British roads. From municipal vehicles to delivery trucks, the company played an important role in early commercial transport. Carrier helped shape how goods and services moved across Britain in the early 20th century, but today, the name has almost completely disappeared. So what happened? How did one of Britain's early truck manufacturers fade into history? In 1908, the clatter of looms faded from a brick mill on Leeds Road in Huddersfield, replaced by the sharper clang of hammers and the scent of hot oil. Brothers James and William Carrier, both engineers with experience at John & Sons, saw a future in motorised transport at a time when most British goods still moved by horse and cart. They put their names above the door, Carrier Motors Limited, and set about turning an old textile factory into a working motorworks. The transformation was hands-on and immediate. Windows were pried open to vent fumes from the first engines, and the old weaving floors were cleared for rows of steel chassis. Early catalogues from 1909 listed sturdy 3-ton delivery vans, municipal trucks, and a handful of 2-ton lorries, all powered by Dorman 4-stroke petrol engines. The machines were basic but reliable, built for the rough roads of West Yorkshire and the long days demanded by local councils and hauliers. On the shop floor, the work was physical and direct. Foremen barked orders over the rattle of riveters. Apprentices filed axle housings by hand, learning their trade under the watchful eyes of men who had spent years in the mills. The founders themselves could often be found on the floor, sleeves rolled up, inspecting welds or debating the best way to reinforce a spring bracket. The ethos was simple: make it strong, make it last, and make it easy to fix. This attitude shaped every van and truck that left the yard, and it quickly set Carrier apart from the handful of other motor builders cropping up around the north of England. Early customers were close to home. Huddersfield Council placed one of the first orders in 1910, commissioning a fleet of waste collection vans. The trucks were painted in council livery, their heavy wheels rolling past rows of terraced houses, collecting rubbish and setting a new standard for municipal service. Word spread quickly, and the company's reputation for practical engineering drew interest from neighbouring towns and local businesses. By 1912, the workshop was busy turning out municipal carriage-type lorries and delivery vans, each one assembled by hand and tested on the rough cobbles outside the factory gates. The converted mill on Leeds Road became a hub for mechanical know-how. Workers swapped ideas about gear ratios over lunch, and the founders encouraged small improvements: a better clutch here, a stronger axle there. The atmosphere was one of shared purpose to build vehicles that could handle the everyday demands of British roads and weather. That spirit of practical invention would become the foundation for Carrier's later innovations, and it set the tone for a company that would, for a time, help define the look and feel of British urban transport. The steady hum of Carrier's Huddersfield works soon found its rhythm in the demands of local government. In 1910, when Huddersfield Council signed for a fleet of Carrier refuse vans, it was not just a matter of swapping horses for engines. It was a calculated decision by the borough depot manager, who needed vehicles that could handle rough stone roads, unpredictable weather, and long days without breakdowns. The new trucks wore the council's crest, but their real badge of honour was reliability. Every morning, depot crews checked oil and swept out the cabs. The lorries started up, collected waste from back alleys and main streets, and returned for their evening inspection. If a part failed, the depot's own fitters could swap it out with tools they already owned. No special training, no waiting for rare spares. Word of this practical advantage travelled quickly through the region. Neighbouring councils in Dewsbury, Halifax and Wakefield sent delegations to Huddersfield's depot. They inspected the Carrier vans, asked about fuel costs, and watched as mechanics replaced a worn clutch in under an hour. By 1912, Carrier was filling orders for municipal carriage-type lorries, each one tailored to the needs of a specific borough, some with high-sided bodies for refuse, others with flatbeds for roadworks. The depot manager's logbook from 1913 lists routine maintenance intervals, with most trucks clocking over 100 miles a week on local runs. For councils, this predictability was gold. The municipal market became Carrier's anchor through the turbulence of the 1910s and the 1920s. Even as the First World War upended supply chains and labour markets, council contracts kept the factory busy. Production records show that civilian output, especially municipal vans, continued alongside military work. In 1919, as towns across Yorkshire and Lancashire rebuilt their services, Carrier delivered 112 new municipal units, almost triple the number from 7 years earlier. The company's reputation for sturdy, straightforward engineering made it a first call for depot managers tasked with stretching tight budgets. Carrier's approach to municipal sales was hands-on. Factory representatives visited council garages, listened to the depot managers' complaints about other makes, cracked axles, hard-to-source parts, awkward controls, and offered practical solutions. Each sale came with a printed service manual and a promise. If something broke, Carrier would send a man out or ship the part by rail. This support mattered. For cash-strapped councils, the ability to keep a truck running for a decade or more with minimal fuss meant more than any advertising claim. By the early 1920s, the company's order books were filled with repeat business from councils large and small. Municipal contracts provided a steady revenue stream, funding factory expansion and new tooling. The depot manager's perspective, focused on uptime, cost and simplicity, shaped Carrier's design ethos. It also set the stage for the next leap, the development of specialised models that would make Carrier a household name in British municipal fleets for decades to come. In 1930, the Carrier Cob made its debut at the London Motor Show, drawing attention for its unusual shape and clever engineering. The Cob was not just another delivery van. It was a mechanical horse designed to outmaneuver real ones on twisting city streets. With its low-profile chassis and three-wheel layout, the Cob could slip under railway bridges, turn in tight courtyards and couple with trailers in a matter of seconds. The secret lay in its automatic horseshoe ramp, a coupling mechanism that let a single driver swap loads without ever leaving the cab. For urban depots and municipal yards, this was a revelation. Day after day, Cobs swapped refuse bins, market carts and delivery boxes, keeping up with the relentless pace of interwar Britain. A Carrier design engineer at the time described the challenge. City streets were narrow, loading docks cramped, and traditional four-wheel lorries struggled to keep up. The Cob's pivoting front wheel and compact wheelbase allowed it to spin almost in place. Its Jowett twin-cylinder engine delivered steady torque at low speeds, reducing clutch wear and making stop-start work less punishing on both machine and driver. Mechanics praised the welded steel frame for its strength, and depot managers liked that routine maintenance could be done with basic tools. The Cob's low step-in height made it easy for workers to hop on and off, especially during long shifts collecting market waste or delivering milk. The Cob was not alone in Carrier's 1930s lineup. The company offered a growing range of specialist vehicles: refuse collectors with reinforced steel ribs, street sweepers powered by reduction gears, and tip lorries fitted with hydraulic tilts. Each was designed with the same philosophy: durable, easy to fix, and ready for the daily grind of public service. By 1934, Carrier had sold over 2,400 Cob units, with orders from councils in London, Manchester and Glasgow. The Cob's quick change system cut collection times by up to 15% in some boroughs, a figure that made headlines in trade journals and drew the attention of larger competitors. Municipal contracts kept the Huddersfield works busy, but the Cob's versatility also appealed to private hauliers. Small delivery firms adopted the Cob to replace horse-drawn wagons, saving money on feed and stable hands. The Cob's automatic coupling let a single driver handle multiple loads, reshaping the economics of urban transport. Trade press reviews in 1939 called the Cob unmatched in manoeuvrability and low operating cost, and factory records show that the model outsold Carrier's traditional lorry range throughout the decade. Carrier's reputation for practical innovation was at its peak. The Cob's success, along with a diversified range of municipal and delivery vehicles, made the company a fixture in British towns and a tempting prospect for bigger industrial groups. The inventive spirit behind the Cob, solving real-world problems with clever, reliable engineering, would soon attract the attention of the Roots Group, setting the stage for a new chapter in the company's history. the 1935 Rootes Group acquisition of Carrier marked a decisive shift. On October the 1st, Carrier was folded into a growing stable of brands, each now subject to Rootes' drive for efficiency and scale. Rootes executives saw potential in Carrier's municipal expertise, but the new strategy was clear: reduce duplication, standardise components, and push for bigger production runs. Boardroom memos from the era reveal a focus on group profits over local engineering traditions. The age of independent decision-making at Huddersfield was over. By the late 1930s, Carrier's product range was trimmed. The Cob and Municipal chassis survived for their specialist appeal, but Comma, Rootes' own brand, was positioned as the group's standard-bearer for general-purpose lorries. A Rootes executive in a 1936 trade journal described Carrier as the specialist arm responsible for municipal and technical work, and not intended to compete with Comma. This internal boundary would define Carrier's future. War changed everything. In 1939, Carrier's Huddersfield plant became a vital cog in Rootes' military output. The Ministry of Supply demanded 4-ton trucks and mobile workshops at speed. By 1943, the factory hit a record: over 3,800 units built in a single year. A foreman later recalled that the line never stopped. We would finish a shift and the next crew would already be waiting, no lights out, not even at Christmas. Production was relentless, adapting to new models and specifications as Rootes coordinated output across its sites to meet government quotas. The focus was on volume, reliability, and rapid delivery to the front. Wartime pressure forced change. Custom Huddersfield parts gave way to standardised components sourced from across the Rootes network. Manuals were rewritten, and a 1942 directive imposed group-wide engineering standards. The old Carrier approach, tailoring vehicles for local councils, began to disappear. The war brought pride and exhaustion, but also cemented group control over design and production. After the war, demand for trucks remained strong, but Rootes' priorities shifted. Comma became the focus for investment, advertising, and dealer support. Internal memos from the early 1950s show Carrier being repositioned as a niche brand for specialist municipal chassis. Output numbers tell the story, from nearly 4,000 units at the wartime peak to around 1,100 by 1958. In 1954, a Rootes memo called for maximum interchangeability of chassis, cabs, and running gear between Comma and Carrier. Standardization was now policy. On the shop floor, the changes were unmistakable. Fitters assembled vehicles that increasingly resembled their Comma counterparts, with fewer unique features and less room for local adaptation. The Carrier badge remained, but the company's independence and reputation for tailored solutions faded under group policy. By the close of the 1950s, Carrier's role was clear: respected for its heritage and technical skill, but confined to a shrinking corner of the Rootes empire. Chrysler's arrival in 1967 brought a new kind of pressure to the old municipal yards and the shrinking Carrier dealer network. The American parent company, looking at the books, saw overlapping brands and a market that had shifted underfoot. Across Britain, local councils were no longer buying small batches of specialist trucks from trusted suppliers. Instead, procurement officers awarded contracts in bulk, favouring manufacturers who could guarantee fleets, standardised parts, and the lowest price per unit. One procurement officer in Leeds described the new system as buying buses like you buy light bulbs, one size fits all, delivered on schedule. Chrysler's strategists saw little room for the Carrier badge. Their plan was simple: consolidate product lines, close smaller dealers, and focus on the highest volume models under the Comma and Dodge names. Internal memos from 1968 spell out the logic. Economies of scale would drive down costs, and a unified dealer network would streamline sales across Europe. For Carrier, this meant that unique municipal chassis, once tailored for every borough's quirks, were now seen as costly distractions. The Cob and its successors disappeared from catalogues as Chrysler moved to standardise everything from wheelbases to maintenance schedules. The numbers told the story. By 1969, over 80% of municipal vehicle contracts in the UK went to just 3 major suppliers: Ford, Leyland and Bedford. Carrier's share, once a mainstay in council yards, dropped below 5%. The Huddersfield works, which had survived world wars and economic slumps, now faced closure as Chrysler shifted production to larger, more profitable plants. The Carrier name, once a symbol of local ingenuity and reliability, was quietly erased from brochures and order forms, leaving only a handful of badges on aging trucks still in service. March 1971 brought silence to the Huddersfield works. After more than 60 years, the gates closed for good, ending Carrier's story as a living manufacturer. The closure wasn't just a local event, it was part of a wave that swept through British industry in the early 1970s. In less than a decade, the number of independent commercial vehicle makers in the UK was halved, as mergers and takeovers squeezed out smaller names. Carrier, once a fixture in council depots and city streets, disappeared from the DVLA register by the mid-1970s. The last official Cob vanished from the books in 1975, its serial number quietly archived. Yet the name refused to vanish completely. At the Huddersfield Transport Museum, a handful of restored Cobs and Municipal trucks stand in careful rows. Their paint is fresh, but the steel beneath still bears the marks of decades-old repairs. An industry historian standing beside a 1938 Cob points to the welded frame and the coupling ramp, evidence of the kind of practical design that once set Carrier apart. He traces the rise and fall of municipal truck makers, noting how centralised procurement and consolidation left little room for small batch specialists. For him, each surviving vehicle is a counterpoint to the official record, a reminder that engineering legacies can outlast the companies that built them. A restorer with hands black with grease describes the first time he heard an old Cob engine fire after years of silence. The sound, he says, is different from any modern lorry, a slow, deliberate chug, rich with memory. For a few moments, the past is tangible again. These living machines, cared for by enthusiasts and historians, keep the Carrier story alive in a world that has moved on. Even as the brand faded from roads and records, its echoes persist in every engine turned over and every badge polished for a new generation to discover. Today, most traces of Carrier have vanished from our roads, but the challenges that erased its name, including industry consolidation, global competition and shifting priorities, still shape what survives. As British manufacturing faces renewed pressure, Carrier's fate warns us: when heritage is overlooked, the fabric of local industry unravels. What's lost isn't just a badge, but a piece of the nation's working story. Share your thoughts on what legacy endures.